So I've been thinking lately about friendship. And if you've been watching the channel any period of time, you've seen a lot of my friends on the channel because I interact with them a lot. Sometimes it's a little exhausting, but I interact with them, and it has caused me, in making these videos and seeing them on screen, to think carefully about the value of friendship in my life and in my education and in my business and in my church experience, and where the friends have come from and what impact have they made on my life. And then during this last week, Buckin Billy Ray Smith and his wife came down, and we got acquainted with them, and that was startlingly comfortable, considering how different our upbringings in different countries and different ages. It was great. And so all of that to say that I want to talk about and sort of think out loud about the role of friendship in my life and in my marriage, and maybe there would be something here for you as you think about the value of your friends, or if you need to attach more value to friendship and what the consequences of that might be. So Brady is a friend of mine who runs a camera and comes with great ideas, and he helps Nate and I a lot. And he is good at asking questions. And I think that if I respond to his questions, I may get a more authentic look about what I really think about friendship and its significance in my life. So Brady, I'm open to your questions, and I'll answer them the best I can.
Yeah, so you spent a few days or a week with Billy Ray, and he's very different. He's significantly different from you. Religious beliefs, political beliefs, the political one, that's a hard one to overcome right now. He's all around different from you, and that's not typical. Why does that matter to you? Why does that difference matter to you? Or does it matter to you?
So he comes from a way different upbringing. I had two parents that were steady as a ticking clock, and he didn't. His mom, anyhow, difference in the upbringing, religious perspective, radically different. He couldn't even tell me exactly what it was that he believed, but he believes that God is good, whatever God is, and that where we are in life is where we ought to be, and that's different than my perspective. We share experience in logging and power saws and hard work and working with people that you can trust, and he's been badly injured in the woods a few times, and I was never hurt bad enough to miss a day's work. But it was like a breath of fresh air for me to realize, wait a minute, this guy is a kindred spirit even though we didn't come out of the same nest, and to feel how easy it was to begin to forge bonds of really significant friendship in just a few days, in spite of the fact that the more superficial things didn't necessarily line up. That felt great.
Do you try to avoid those differences, or do you seek them out?
It seems like, great question, do I seek them out? I've taken friendship in my life as it came, and the opportunities for friendship kind of came most of the time organically from the circles I was already traveling in, the friends or family of the people I already knew, or as quite often a consequence of the work or the craft or the tools or the professional avenues I was pursuing. I would encounter the people that were in those grooves. Cy Swan for one, Ken Jordan for one, Dustin Furch for one, Leo Folsom and Bob Hovenden, and this list of people, Warren Hafen and David Day, that they just came with the overall path of my life. I identified them as I was staggering down the road. There they were.
Do you have any, well, I take that away. Tell me about how prioritizing friendship has changed throughout the different seasons in your life. As a young dad with kids and a busier family now versus you're pretending to be retired.
Yeah. Okay. I was kind of a hard-headed, arrogant 22, 23, 24, 25-year-old guy. Now I'm still a little hard-headed and still too arrogant, but there's a little more humility and teachability now. Life can drill that into you. And I think that I bypassed or missed, because of my defensive, some good opportunities for friendship because somebody just rubbed me the wrong way, or I rubbed somebody else the wrong way, or I perceived myself as being in competition with this person for recognition. We've got chickens out here, and I watch those chickens and I think of what a good metaphor they are for so much of our human experience, where if you throw a handful of table scraps out in that chicken hen yard, it's a race and a fight between those hens for who gets the biggest piece first. And I think I was more like one of those chickens as a younger man, looking at that thing or that recognition or that promotion, and I think I probably stepped on my tail and foreclosed some opportunities for friendship that would have been blessings then. So I don't know if that answered your question, but as I got older, I think I got less defensive. I think it got easier to learn from the people around me instead of feeling like I had to teach the people around me. And as that arrogance maybe softened a little, the opportunities for real fulfillment in friendship increased, if that answers your question.
I think so. You're saying it was more of a pride or arrogance thing in your younger days. I feel like the problem of not having enough friends or not having quality friends for a lot of people is different reasons, but for a lot of younger men it might be just time. We're too busy. We're glued to our jobs.
We're glued to our jobs and our responsibilities and our hobbies or our addictions.
So now that you're in this stage, you still have a million people reaching out to you. You still have a million opportunities. You can still be as busy as you want to be. What motivates you to prioritize and maintain these friendships?
So I've had something that's been making me kind of sad lately, and that is that I have a lot of friends in my life. I'm wealthy in that way. And not every friend that comes into your life is as easy to maintain a relationship with as others. Or the circumstances of your life change, and what it was that helped you overlap with that person now changed in your circumstance. So with the added people that have come into my circle of acquaintance as a function of this channel, and it's a huge number, I have sadly and with some regret had to minimize the amount that I could have left over for some people that used to be closer to me. I don't like that, but it's been a cost of having a larger... There's some upper limit on how many people you can have close relationships with. I don't know what the limit is, but there's some upper limit. And you have to be willing to try to increase that number because of the wealth that friendship is. But at some point, and especially, I don't think this is what you asked me, but especially if there's a person or a friend whose influence becomes hurtful for some reason, or is limiting, or reduces you, or is encouraging something that used to be a bad habit. Part of understanding friendship is knowing when it's time to let go of a friendship, which may be its own conversation. But anyhow, I have some feelings of loss in that way because the circle has gotten so unmanageably big that it has not been able to remain the same in all cases.
So along the lines of what we're talking about, how to make a friendship easy, how does the size of your circle relate to that? Or I guess, what have you found to be a healthy circle for you between maintaining 100 shallow relationships versus one best friend or 4 pretty good friends?
I don't know, but I guess if there's a secret to friendship is that if it's not organic, it's not friendship. If you set your cap to become a friend with a particular person, there's probably going to be some compromises you have to make inside of yourself in order to achieve that. Or maybe this friendship that you're pursuing is really just business posing as friendship. Well, that's not friendship. So as far as identifying how many and which ones, I think that it has to be organic or it doesn't count. And that is part of the reason that I'm so energized by this friendship with Buckin Billy Ray. It's organic. It was a function of overlapping as YouTubers. And then it became clear to me and apparently to him that, wow, this is pretty good. And not only is there the mutual benefit of collaboration of a YouTube channel, which could contaminate a friendship, but I think if I quit YouTube tomorrow, I would remain in contact with Buckin Billy Ray, and I would still take my bride up there and visit them in Vancouver Island, and it would be an ongoing blessing. So maybe the safest thing is to be patient in friendship, keep your eyes open for it, and be open to it. How about that? Just be open.
So you mentioned that, we all know that some friendships are more difficult to maintain than others, not necessarily meaning that they're not worth it or as valuable, but some are harder than others. Mm-hmm. Would you say that what makes it easy is that it is organic, or is there something else to it?
I guess for me, some friendships, there have been people that I've been acquainted with for a long period of time, and a real friendship hasn't blossomed. And then I suddenly am put in contact with them in a setting where I recognize something about them, or an interest they have, or something that is exceptional in them or in their world that is appealing to me, and maybe they have identified something like that within me. And so if the friendship may have been slow to start and then develop fairly rapidly for a period of time, but I think if you're forcing it, it's just not the same. But on the other hand, there are people that you can see that person needs a friend. And so maybe there's space for setting a course for friendship when you see that a person is in need of a friend, and then heading in that direction with the intention of bringing something to that relationship that they need. And if there's something there that I benefit from, okay. And if there's just not, then we just chart a different course and say, well, maybe someone else will come along who will be able to provide for that person what they need. That's a type of good that we can do, I think. And it's easy to get really confused about how valuable our friendship with them might be. It's easy probably to overestimate. I mean, nobody's as smart as we are, right? Nobody does things the right way like we do. And so there's probably its own brand of toxicity in assuming that a relationship with us would be a benefit for someone else. That's kind of nauseating to even say. And yet, giving, extending, especially olive branches. How about that? You asked about if a friendship's hard. Maybe a friendship has gone sideways, or there's been a misunderstanding, or your political positions have put distance between you. Maybe one of the most grown-up things we can do is to circle back around after a while and take a run at an olive branch and a lunch, or I don't know. But it's too easy to write people off. And as I say this, my conscience smites me. It's pretty easy to write people off because we're busy and just can't do it, and our circumstances changed, and maybe we were never that good a friend to them anyway, unless we can find the motivation to extend ourselves again. And even if the friendship languished because we were hurt, being willing to make ourselves vulnerable one more time.
We're going to ask you a hard question.
Great.
Do you have any friendships you've undervalued, or any regrets around friendship that you'd be willing to share?
A little. I can think of a couple of friendships that it would be nice, I would enjoy having the conversations with that individual or those individuals that used to be available, and now I feel like those conversations are not available, or I feel like that person's needs have become so great and so beyond my ability to make a positive impact that I choose to focus time elsewhere. I'm not sure that conclusion is or was justified, but I don't, from a certain perspective, you can never step in the same river twice, right? I mean, life flows by, and our days flow by, and we change, and other people change, and at some level, if you're not changing together and you go back to reestablish contact, you're both too different. And maybe the acquaintance would never have blossomed previously and can't now, compared to those kindred spirits for where, 20 years apart seems to have made no difference. And I don't know what the explanation is for that, but I think there have been friendships that I have undervalued or been at fault in allowing to languish.
If you could step in the same river twice, in the broader sense of friends, would you do anything differently? What would you change about the type of friend you've been?
I have wished. So I grew up in Southern Oregon. I had seen maybe, when I moved away from here when I was 22 to Wyoming, northern Wyoming, I maybe had seen, laid eyes on, in my part of where I lived, maybe 4 or 5 black people. No more than that. This is a white bread community, not quite as much now. After Katrina came ashore in New Orleans, we now have more black people here. And it's a pleasure to see them. But I've always wished that I could have worked with a black man more. I worked with a man named Michael, worked with him for maybe 4 months. It was great. I could have conversations with him that I'd never been able to have with anyone else. And it was great. I have always wished that I could have worked with some number of people from that community, that subculture in our greater United States of America culture. But it hasn't happened, and at this point, I really doubt that it will. When I moved to Las Vegas, I got to work with a lot of Latino guys, and I reached the conclusion after a while that this was in the late 80s and early 90s, that the average Latino construction worker was a better man than the average gringo construction worker. That came as a revelation to me, because growing up here in white bread Southern Oregon, all I knew about Mexicans was that they would steal your bike and they all had a knife in their pocket. Now that was a racial stereotype. And being in Las Vegas and working with those good men changed that for me. And so it makes me wonder how many other stereotypes that if I had a chance to have broken them down would have been as big a benefit to me as other aspects of friendship have been.
So my last question on that, we're in Southern Oregon. We're in a little bit of a bubble. How do you go against that? How do you work towards the negative side effects of being in a bubble? Whether that's going outside it, or is there anything in your mindset, your perspective that you do differently?
Well, this YouTube thing has forced some of that, because it's put me in contact with a much larger world. And as I've gotten older, I've tried to be more self-aware, inward-looking, and I've become maybe more aware of my confirmation biases. I had a fellow who taught me the meaning of that term. I hadn't even heard it before, and then it became trendy, and it's everywhere, and it's real. So all I've been able to do, Brady, is just try to think those thoughts more often. And when I hear political fistfights going on, try to flip it around and say, now, if I was them, that old thing, put yourself in the other guy's shoes, walk a mile in somebody else's moccasins. As you get older, it gets easier to think those thoughts. But aside from that, I can't say any concrete thing that I've done to be able to break out of the bubble of where I have spent so much time, including in construction, in a blue-collar life, working 40 or 50 or 60 or 80 hours a week. I don't know how to break too far out of that except just try.
So on that note of try, the last thing I want to ask you is, the common thread I hear is that you're a lifelong learner. You've at least made some effort to talk with other people, build relationships outside your comfort zone, with a level of intentionality. You read a lot. What's some of your favorite advice, a few pieces of your favorite advice on maintaining and building friendships?
So a baseline thing is in Proverbs, I think, that it admonishes us, if you want friends, to show yourself a friend, to be friendly. And then it says, there is a friend that sticketh closer than a brother. Now, I've got a wonderful brother. He's 4 years my junior, so when you're growing up, 4 years is a long time, and we didn't really know each other as peers. And so my relationship with Brett is positive and based on trust. He would say the same thing. I don't know Brett near as well as I know Dustin Furch at this point, or any number of other good men, some departed, Neil Groves and Leo Folsom and Bob Hovenden, aforementioned. And there is a friend that you can, you know, they say friends are the family you choose, because family has bonds of duty and trust and mutual respect, hopefully, and willingness to sacrifice self for them. Well, a friendship can become the same thing. And I guess I've learned a lot just from the books I've read. C.S. Lewis, I've got one here that I was going to talk about, the 4 loves, friendship being one, eros and affection and charity being the other 3. It's a great book. I recommend anything by Lewis. But even in novels, in good novels, even in Louis L'Amour westerns, you can read it with the intention of understanding about the friendships. Orson Scott Card writes powerfully about people's moral choices and how their friends come and go and how they deal with betrayal and whether they betray or the other person betrays. So I think that for myself, I had sort of a personality that was open to it. I received instruction from my parents that made me better. Do unto others as you would have others do unto you, the golden rule, which superseded the silver rule from about 600 BC. Thales of Miletus, Confucius, several other guys about 600 BC taught the silver rule. Don't do to somebody else what you wouldn't have them do to you. Well, that's a weak sauce version of the golden rule that Jesus taught, which is do unto others, be proactive, as you would have them do unto you. That becomes the essence of friendship. My mother taught me that. My dad demonstrated that. My religious experience and instruction, being your brother's keeper, these things sort of taught me to think that way. And one of the things that Buckin mentioned to me that is part of his profound respect for his mom, a single mom doing an impossible job, was that she taught him the golden rule too. Though not an overtly religious family, the golden rule has manifested itself in Buckin's life because of his mom's efforts. So from whatever perspective you come, I think we can, if we want to, we can place a higher value on being and receiving friendship. But maybe the takeaway, and maybe the way to wrap this up, is don't expect to have a friend if you haven't applied yourself to learning how to be a friend. You've got to learn how to be a friend, and then be open to friendship, and you're going to be amazed at the effect on your life, I think. Does that answer any of your questions at all?
It does. It does. I think that's good. Is there any? I'm going to ask you a bad question. If there was only one piece of advice on what makes an easy friend, what would you say it is?
Anyone who is not self-absorbed can be an easy friend. I think that's true. I don't know, I just made it up. But the people that we come across who only think about themselves, like C.S. Lewis again, that humility doesn't consist in thinking less of yourself, but of thinking of yourself less. Well, when you meet somebody who's able to think of themselves less, cement a relationship with them. And if you've learned to think of yourself less, it'll be easy to cement that relationship, and the friendship will be easy. I think that extends into marriage. I think that extends into the relationships we have with our brothers and our sisters and our parents. Anyone that we meet, you meet someone who thinks of themselves less. And if you've learned that or are learning that, probably the friendship is going to be easy. And almost certainly, it's going to be one of the blessings of your life. Thank you for watching Essential Craftsman. And keep up the good work.